Why are African teams being knocked out late game in the World Cup? If you look to the graphic to my left, you'll see where three African teams, namely Ivory Coast, Congo, and Senegal, all got knocked out conceding late goals at the 86th minute. And if you want to toss in the Canada-South Africa match, they too conceded a late goal to be knocked out. So what is the cause or the possible causes for this very concerning pattern? Is there a reason? Are there several reasons why African teams seem to concede late? Let's explore some of those possible reasons. Guys, welcome back to JJ's Football Corner. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. So let's look into it. The first thing I want to mention is the pressure that comes after the 75th minute. From what I've noticed, a lot of African teams in this World Cup, they seem to play fairly well for the first 60 to 70 minutes. Play a very good first half, they create chances, they're dominant on the ball, they pass the ball well. However, it seems as the second half rolls on, there's this tactical shift by the coaches to, instead of playing their game, there's this tactical retreat where they're like, well, we're leading 1-0, so we're gonna just rip up the script and we're gonna go super negative. We're not gonna impose ourselves anymore. And what that does, it puts the team on the back foot, right? And allows these nations, England, Belgium, to find a way to get back into the game. Right? That's what it does. But why do they tactically retreat? Why not impose themselves? You're leading, right? You're leading. And look, I get it. You know, you can't attack all the time. You have to be able to, know when to attack and, when to defend properly. But there just seem to be this inability after about 70 to 75 minutes of holding that concentration, right? Of playing their football. Just this tactical negativity coming from the coaches. But there could be reasons for that. One of those reasons could be simply there's just a lack of squad depth. The starting 11 of, some of the African teams versus the European teams, they may be similar in terms of quality. They may have a very good starting 11. But when you get to the bench, look at Belgium, for example. They could bring on Meunier and Lukaku. England could bring on Anthony Gordon. These guys came on and absolutely changed the match. Do the African nations have the same squad depth? Can they go to their bench when things are looking haggard, when things are looking rough, when they need somebody to come on and put on a masterclass in slowing down the tempo of the game, changing the tactics a little bit, game management, that sort of thing? Do they have the players on the bench that they can bring on that can effect those changes? I don't think they have the same quality as some of the bigger teams, right? I don't believe so. I'm not saying that they lack quality. That's not what I'm saying. But the ability to bring on Lukaku, Meunier, Anthony Gordon, if England wanted, they had any number of players that they could, bring on into the match to effect those changes. Do the African nations have that same ability to bring effective players off the bench? I think the answer is no. The next thing I want to look at is winning the game by all means, or winning ugly. And what I mean by that is slowing down the tempo of the game, doing different things, winning tactical fouls, right? Changing momentum in the game. When you realize that you're against against the clash, they're pushing. A lot of times, when you look at the African nations, there's this naivete in which the coaches, I'm not gonna late all on the blame on the players. There's just this naivety in which the way in which they deal with the change in momentum, when they deal with the change in the wave in attacks at time, there's just this, maybe it's a lack of experience winning football matches in different ways. If you watch club football, for example, when you look up, for example, at Real Madrid has that ability to win games playing spectacular football or ugly football. You understand me? They have that ability. Hey, let's go on the front foot. Sometimes we have to go on the back foot. They adapt. It's dynamic, right? Dynamic. And that goes into my other point about game management. Changing the dynamic, of the team as the dynamic of the match changes, right? I just think sometimes I'm watching this match and these matches and I'm like, this is screaming out for this particular type of player. It goes back to squad depth. Maybe they don't have that type of player. Maybe some of the teams don't have that type of player. But, you look at it and I'm like, why did you make that sub? Right? When they took out Pape Gueye yesterday, right, for Senegal, you look into it and you're like, why did you take off that player? What like if you're managing that game, why did you take off that player? And I don't believe he was injured. If he was injured, I stand corrected. But in terms of game management, how is that? How did that? Because they subbed him off, and the sub that came on immediately got a yellow card, and obviously after that he has to just be careful after that. Right, it's those little things in game. When you look at, for example, I know this is not about Africa, but when you look, for example, Brazil, Japan, when Ancelotti made those changes, it changed the dynamic, the flow state of the game. I think the African nations have to work on how they manage the games, the in-game management. They have 5-minute target, the 10-minute target, 15-minute target. These are things that I just believe that they have to improve upon. Mental belief. Now, this is a controversial one because, there's a lot of talk about African nations not having that belief that they can go toe-to-toe with the Europeans, with the South Americans, with the Asians, with the North Americans. And while I believe there is some truth to that, I think it's more specific in that they go 1-0 up or 2-0 up, and it's almost as if there's a shell shock. So they'll play their game well, but then when they're ahead, it's almost like there's this shell shock. We can't believe that we're leading. We can't believe that we're dominating. It's almost as if they're waiting for the bell to drop. And even if you listen to the commentary, the commentary, very biased by the way, but the commentary alludes to this, that a lot of times you're watching the team, they don't play with that conviction that, hey, we are as good or not, or even better than this team. You look, for example, at the Ivory Coast Norway match. I believe that Ivory Coast has an equal or even better team than Norway, and I believe they should have knocked out Norway. That's my belief. Even though I believe in my prediction, I said Norway would win, but I changed my mind afterward. Ivory Coast has a very, very good team. They should have been able. They created chances. They should have been able to knock out Norway. But there's just this mental block at times when you see the way how the shots they take, the passing. There's just this lack of conviction, man. They don't play with this, flair, this confidence to their game at times. And again, this is just my perception. This is an opinion-based video. I could be wrong. Others may have, different opinion. Remember to leave your, comments, and I'll read them. But I just think there's this lack of conviction at times with African teams, and they just don't believe that. Oh my gosh, we're leading 1-0. I can't believe this. They need to work on that. You're good. You're good teams, you have good players, right? So just work on that, guys. And then one of the biggest things is the missed chances. From the group stage to now, the African teams create so many chances, so many missed opportunities. What is up with the African strikers, man? What's up with them? Why can't they? And some of the wingers too. Yes, I know Ismail Assar had a good World Cup so far, but man, oh man, they missed some really clear-cut chances. And you know, when you look at England, Kane got that chance, buried it, got another one, buried it. You know, that's the difference. You create so many clear-cut chances, you have to put them away. That's something that, you know, the African teams have to work on, man. Putting away your food. Putting away your food. You're creating all these chances and just missing them. But I also want to end by saying, is this an African only problem? No. Despite what the commentators might make you think, and despite how some of the commentators really look down on African football, I want to say this. This is an underdog kind of mentality. If you watch club football, you will see many times clubs will be playing their best game, and then 70 to 75th minute they lose that confidence. You understand me? A goal goes into the net, or a goal hits the post, a sub comes on, and all of a sudden there's panic. There's disbelief creeping in. And I think that plays a role in a lot, in, you know, just plays a role in how a lot of these matches play out in the in this round of 32. You know, Morocco still had that belief, and that's why, you know, so far they're the only African nation to go through. I hope that this video, you know, covers some of the salient topics, and I really do hope Egypt, you know, Mo Salah is my boy. I hope Egypt doesn't fall into the same trap. Egypt versus Australia, this is a winnable match for Egypt, and I hope that, you know, Egypt can get the job done. And you know, thanks again, guys, for tuning in. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Till next time. Later.